He said, Marty, you're in the middle of a deal, aren't you? And I smiled. He said, oh, my God, you're going to get SeaWorld, aren't you? You're going to close it. And I said, just watch and see.
Welcome to Breaking Ground SA, a RECSA podcast where we dig into real estate deals, developments, and decision makers shaping San Antonio. I'm your host, Stephanie Reyes, President and CEO, joined by my co-host, local policy expert, Rob Killen. Let's break some ground. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Breaking Ground SA, coming to you from the IBC Bank studio. Today's sponsor is Saul Schwartz and Associates. Our guest is Marty Wender. Marty Wender has been working as a large-scale land developer in San Antonio for decades. He's widely known as a great salesman, an optimistic and confident dealmaker, and a man who overcame seemingly impossible challenges to put places like Crown Bridge and Westover Hills on the literal map. As you can imagine, he has quite a few great stories to tell. In this episode, we'll hear how he transformed the west side of San Antonio, how a deal with Southwestern Bell spurred economic development, and his philosophy on closing a deal. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, we have Marty Wender in the IBC Bank studio. Thanks for joining us, Marty.
Well, thank you very much.
Marty, thank you for being here. I'm so excited for this episode. You have such great stories.
Well, thank you. I maybe because I'm old. I've lived in San Antonio for almost 57 years.
Wow.
And I was born in Fort Worth, went to the University of Texas at Austin, married a San Antonio girl, and then I came to San Antonio in 1969.
Well, that's what I want to dig into. Let's go back to the boy from Fort Worth. What brought you to San Antonio?
My wife. I'm a firm believer that any man that says he's king of his castle will lie about other things.
Smart man. So yes, let's talk about it. So growing up, what was childhood like?
I grew up in Fort Worth. Middle class, not rich, not poor. Everything I did, the organizations, I always took a leadership position. I love to work with people. An interesting thing about my life, I'm Jewish, and on the Jewish high holy days, I'd go to the temple, and the people I admired the most were businessmen who made a difference in Fort Worth. And I said, when I grow up, I want to be a person. I don't want to be a mayor I want to be a business person that does something that makes your community better. And that really, I always thought about.
So did you know that meant developer?
No, it had nothing to do with the developer. It just, developing came later. So then when I graduated high school in 1965, I went to the University of Texas and was in the business honors program. And what was so good about that program was that the dean of the school was George Kosmeski, who was a founder of Teledyne. And he didn't have professors teaching us. He had men and women who were in business. And that's why one of my ways of doing business is first working with smart people and older people and people who had real life experiences, not just textbook experiences. And my way of doing business is hire the best, pay the most, and listen to them.
That's great advice.
And any of my professionals will tell you that my engineers, my lawyers, my accountants, when they tell me something, I listen to them. And because I know what I know, but more importantly, I know what I don't know. So I'm not an engineer, I'm not an accountant, I'm not a lawyer, but when it comes to selling, get out of my way.
Yeah, that's where
that's what I am. I always tell people I'm in sales, not management. And there are a couple of things in my life, and I'll go through them when we discuss, that really really set me up. When I was first place, I'm dyslexic. They didn't know what dyslexia was when I was a child, but my mother was an educator, and she would not allow me. I was the worst reader in the class. She wouldn't allow me to think I was stupid. She thought it was something else. They thought it was an eye muscle coordination problem, which had nothing to do with it because they didn't know what dyslexia was. But I learned to compensate. And I tell people, if I had a choice of leading my life and not being dyslexic, I wouldn't do it. 1 out of 5 children are dyslexic. And either the prisons are full of people who are dyslexic who give up on themselves, and then you got people like Steve Jobs and Winston Churchill, people who are overachievers because they learned to compensate.
So how'd you get through that? So you didn't recognize what dyslexia was. Your mom didn't recognize what dyslexia. When did you learn that is in fact what the issue was?
I knew I had a problem, which turned out not to be a problem because I compensated. But I didn't hear the word dyslexia until I graduated college. I graduated the University of Texas Business Honors Program in 1969. And since I graduated, I've never read a book for pleasure. Now, I can read, but when somebody tells me they go on vacation to curl up with a book, I have no idea what they're talking about.
Really? It's not your thing?
Well, no. But that's why I hire lawyers, and my lawyers know that I'm not going to read everything, and they highlight what they want me to make the decisions on. My engineers, I don't argue with them. I listen to them. My accountants, I listen to them. That's why I hire the best and pay the most.
Well, that means you got to surround yourself by people you really trust.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I've gone to more funerals of people who've been my advisors than you could ever imagine because I wanted older people. And I learned that at the University of Texas when George Cosmesi with the honors program had people who had been in business, real life, versus somebody who has a PhD and has never made payroll.
That's great. So it's 1969. You graduated UT. You know what you're going to do, or you don't?
Well, I got married, and my wife family had a family business on the near west side.
Of San Antonio.
San Antonio. And I went to work for that business. I was the third generation of the family business. And I was frustrated because I wasn't in the mainstream. I was isolated on the west side, and my father-in-law attitude was don't change anything because he inherited from his father-in-law, and that drove me crazy. And so the best thing that happened to me during the 12 years I worked on the corner of El Paso and South Zarzamora Street was I got to know Henry Cisneros.
Okay.
He was a city councilman for that district, and he knew I was miserable. And when he decided to run for mayor in 1981, I decided to quit the family business and go out on my own. Now, the family business was real estate because we built homes and we had to finance them. And I didn't dislike that, but it wasn't a challenge. So I went out on my own, not knowing what I was going to do.
Did you know anything about the business? Who taught you how to do this work?
Well, I knew a little bit because the 12 years, I knew a little bit about real estate. I had a real estate license, but I didn't do what I do now. So I had no money.
And you're married at this point?
With 3 children.
Oh, okay.
Okay, with no money. And I found a piece of property. The piece of property was a Servtex ranch. It's just north of the rock quarry, which they blew up rocks every day. Okay?
And so for context, this is the early 80s. Is this the early 1980s?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was 82.
82.
And so it developed some other things that's kind of my hallmark. So the property, the guy that showed it to me wouldn't even drive out. I mean, he thought it'd be a waste of time for it to even show it to me. And it's where Camp Bullis Road ended at I-10. And then there was a big mountain. And it was owned by Gibraltar Savings. And 3 years earlier, they put up for $12,000 an acre, 25% down, 16% interest. They went a whole year. And people drove by the frontage and said, this is terrible. So then a year later, they dropped it to $8,000 an acre, 25%, 16% interest. Everybody says, you're crazy. So the day I talked to them, they dropped it to $4,000 an acre, 25% down, 16% interest. And people say, I'm not going to pay 16% interest. I'm not going to pay 25. But I had nothing else to do. And so the guy said to me, here are the keys, but you get to the ranch on Babcock. Well, I didn't know Babcock was out there. I knew Babcock at 410, and I kind of knew it passed UTSA at 1604, but I never thought about it going any further. So then I had a friend with a Jeep, and we get on the ranch, and we're driving all overgrown, and we're driving through it, and we really couldn't see anything. So we got ready to leave, and there was a power line that went over this hill. And I said, well, let's just drive up the power line. And I got to the top. I go, oh, my God. I can see UTSA. I can see the medical center. I can see downtown. And I could see the smokestack on the Dealey power plant on the south side, where I was standing, what is today the front door of the La Cantera Resort.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've ever seen that view, it's unbelievable.
It is.
And the only other people who had seen that view were the people who built the power line. So I again, I had no money. So I went to my best friend in Fort Worth. I said, he had a $100,000 CD. I needed earnest money. And I said, if you let me use your CD for earnest money, I'll give you half the deal. So the property had lots of problems. One, it was next to a quarry, didn't have water, didn't have sewer. But the lesson I learned is that problems are opportunities. So whenever there's a problem, in my whole life, every time I hit the wall with a problem, I stepped back and said, there's an opportunity here. So first, the quarry. So I made an appointment to see Bill Worth, who owned the quarry. And I went to meet him, and I said, look, Bill, I have the property across next door to you under contract, and you blow up rocks every day, and if I buy the property, I can't tell you to stop blowing up rocks. I know that before I got there. But is there going to be a problem? He said, I really haven't told anybody, but we're going to shut down the west side of the quarry. That's where Fiesta, Texas is.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not going to have a problem. Well, I'm the only guy who knew that. Okay? Just asking. So I had a 120-day feasibility. And when the 120 days was up, I flew to Houston, went into Gibraltar Savings, and I said, look, here are the problems, and here's what I've solved. Do you want me to stop or go forward? And since there wasn't a lineup of people outside, they gave me the time. For a year, I spent 1 year, and then I had 2 sales, but no money. And I put all these pieces together, and I knew it was a good deal. But how do I put this? And my partner flew in from Fort Worth, and he said, look, Marty, we don't have that kind of money. And I said, but there's got to be a way to make this work. And he said, look, we'll just find another project. I said, I've invested a year in this project, and I've solved all these problems, except the money.
That's a big one, Marty. That's
everything
a big one.
except the money.
The minor part. So he got back on the plane, and I went down to see a friend of mine who I'd done business with when I worked for my father-in-law, and I explained what I had, and he said, you've got 2 sales? I said, yeah. And he said, Marty, that's a hell of a deal. I'm hooked up with this savings and loan, and we'll lend you the $11 million you need non-recourse.
Wow.
And I'm staring at him. I said, a deal, because I thought that a 25%, because I've had to split with my friend, my partner, 25% of something is better than 100% of nothing.
That's right.
And so, make a long story short, and then the other thing I learned that I got out of this process was people never thought about Camp Bullis Road going to Babcock because you had this big mountain, but there was a valley.
Mm-hmm.
So I came with the idea of taking into the property, turning left, getting it down to the valley, and going all the way to Babcock with a road. Well, the county said all I had to build was a 2-lane collector street. And I said, that makes no sense. Why would I build a collector street? I'm going to build a boulevard. And developers don't like building boulevards because you can't front a house on the boulevard. Well, I wasn't going to build houses or lots. I was going to sell to people who built houses and lots. So I went and built a big boulevard through the property and sold it off. And by solving the problems and deciding to build a bigger road and the success of that project, and then the interest rates dropped. So, it went the prime was 21% at that time. So everybody said, you're crazy to pay 16%. Well, I got to refinance 9 months into it and paid it off in a year, and the 16% disappeared.
Nice.
Wow.
And so we sold it out, and savings and loan, my partner, we split $5.6 million, and I became a large-scale land developer.
Wow. That's a big chunk of cash to get, right?
Well, and also you're talking about 1982.
Yeah, that's a huge chunk
real
of
money.
cash. Yeah.
That's real money.
So you go from being married with 3 kids, not having any money at all. Now you're sitting on a big load of cash. What's your wife say about that?
Well, but more importantly, this is how stupid. More importantly, was then I had a reputation of being a large-scale land developer. And so the hallmarks of my development was solving problems, and number 2, building proper infrastructure. So another project I had was we bought some property in the medical center. At that time, Floyd Curl ended at Wurzbach.
Right.
And the medical center owned all the land, the medical foundation, all the land to a street called Hamilton Wolf. And then above that was Huebner Road, which at that time was a 2-lane county road, but it had the right-of-way for 7 lanes, which it is today.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sitting there looking, and I'm saying, you know something? Camp Bullis Road should go all the way to Huebner and be a new north entrance into the medical center. So I went to the medical foundation with that idea, and they said, absolutely not. I go, why? He said, well, we don't want to turn the medical center into a racetrack. Now, to give you a little bit of reasoning, the medical foundation had a bunch of old people, and when they built those roads out there at the very beginning, there was nothing out there, and they built those big roads, and they used it for a racetrack.
Oh.
But I said, it'll never be a racetrack. You can't get people in and out of the medical center. So he just said, absolutely not. So I said, okay. So I bought up enough land between Hamilton Wolf and Huebner, and I built a boulevard from Huebner to Hamilton Wolf and called it Floyd Curl. And he was so mad at me. He was so mad at me. He said, you knew I didn't want that to happen. You knew you deceived us. And by the way, it's going to cost $1 million to build that road, and we don't have the money. That road may never be built. So I wrote him a letter. I said, well, you get ready to build the road. Partnership will contribute $100,000. Well, that really made him mad.
That made him worse.
Yeah. And so anyway, I just kind of said, look. So 9 months later, I get a phone call from him. Marty, they're going to build this building for the University of Texas, and we got to build that road, and we don't have the money. Can you help me? And I said, okay. So I went to Henry Cisneros, who was mayor, and I said, now this is on land I don't own. Okay, I built my road on my land, but the land in the middle, and I said, it's for the medical foundation. I said, if I can raise half the money, $500,000, will the city match me? He said, okay. So then I raised our gift to $250,000, and there were 5 hospitals on Floyd Curl in the medical center. So I went to each 5 of them and said, I want $50,000 from you. Well, 4 said yes, and 1 said, look, guys, look at me. And again, I was young, and, he's looking down his nose at me. And he said, well, who in the hell came up with $50,000? And I said, me. I said, city's going to pay $500,000. I'm going to pay $250,000. 4 hospitals are going to pay $50,000, and you're the last hospital. He said, what happens if I only want to pay $10,000? And I said, I won't take it. But I'm a bad mouth you to everybody in the medical center that you were the only one who held out. He said, okay, goddammit, I'll do it. So that's how Floyd Curl went all the way to Huebner, and that's the new north entrance into the medical. And drive Floyd Curl now, north of Wurzbach, and take a look at what's on there. Take a look at that road. Oh. It's a boulevard. So the hallmark, one of my hallmarks, is not building inferior infrastructure. Huh. If you're going to build it, do it right.
Well, Marty, I tell you, I'm on the Medical Foundation board now and really appreciate what you did. As hard as it was, I remember when I first heard that story, thinking about that. Medical Foundation just produced a book on the 75th anniversary, told some of these stories, but that's really great.
So then, when I did Crown Ridge, the powers that be, the developers, the argument was whether 10 would be the golden corridor of San Antonio or 281. And I was pushing I-10 because I had Crown Ridge. But what I realized was that why did 10 become the golden corridor and not 281? Well, some people said 281 doesn't go anywhere, but I-10 starts in Jacksonville, Florida, New Orleans, Houston, San Antonio, El Paso, Tucson, Phoenix, and Los Angeles. I-10 is the Santa Monica Freeway. Goes coast to coast. That wasn't the reason. Other people said I-10 was a controlled access freeway, free with access roads, and at that time, 281 was just 4 lanes.
Right.
That wasn't the reason. The reason were what moved to I-10. The medical center was built west of I-10, UTSA west of I-10, Valero west of I-10. So those economic, and USAA, I said USAA.
Yeah.
So it's like dropping a drop in a bucket of water, it radiates out. Well, everybody knew what was happening between 10 and 281, but what people didn't realize was what was happening west of 10. And so when I did Crown Ridge, there were 3 problems in going north. 281 had the problem, and I-10 had the problem. When you go north, you have hard rock. That's where the rock quarries are. So putting sewer lines and water lines underground, a lot more expensive. Then you have the recharge zone. Now, my heart of hearts, I don't believe that developing over the recharge, they've never proved developing over the recharge zone would hurt our water supply, but I don't have enough money and time to convince them they're wrong.
Yeah.
And then the third, whenever there's someplace somebody doesn't want you to develop, they find endangered species. Mm-hmm. And they find bugs in caves, and they find birds. So what I realized was if you moved west, and west was a name people didn't use because when people thought of west, they thought of the near west side. Mm-hmm. But they had no idea what was going on outside 410. And the numbers were the numbers, but no one, it wasn't a surprise. I mean, it wasn't, the facts were there. So once you move west, you get off the recharge zone, you get off the hard rock, and you get away from the birds and the bees and the bugs. And so then I found a piece of land that was 5 ranches, 3,500 acres that 2 people lived on that was not in the city. So I bought them.
That changed everything, Marty.
And that was in the 85, 84. Now, everybody thought I was crazy going west. That was not the way to go. had two problems. One, I didn't get down to 410. Yet I had to get to Calabria and go Petranco Road, so you didn't see it from 410. I finally got to 1604, but 1604 was a two-lane county road, so I had an access problem.
Back when 1604 was called the Death Loop.
Right.
Ah.
So I hired Ralph Bender, and we came up with an idea of a freeway going from Highway 90. Now, they tried to build a Calabria freeway and a Bandera freeway, but when you got to the inner city, it was impossible. But there was a way to get to downtown instead of going through 10 to Highway 90. So we drew a map of a freeway going from Highway 90, where Kelly Air Force Base was, which is now Port San Antonio, through Southwest Foundation for Biomedical Research, all the way to 1604 through my property. So I go to the highway department and I put a grease pencil on an aerial photo and I said, how about this? And the guy who was head of the highway department, his name was Raymond Stotzer. And he was as honest as day was long. And he said, Marty, that's a fantastic idea. I said, great. How long do you think it'd take us to do it? About 30 years. I said, well, that's not going to work. I said, is there anything else you can do? If it's such a great deal, is there anything you can do to help it go faster? He said, Marty, there's really nothing I can do. So I said, well, thank you very much. Well, so I'm getting ready to walk out the door. He said, well, stop, Marty. There's something you can do. I said, wait a minute, what can I do that you can't do? He said, well, you're the salesman. Come up with a plan. He says, look, you were going to build a major boulevard through your property, right? 110 foot, 2 lanes in each direction of center median. Okay, why don't you make it a freeway and do 400 feet? And when you have 3,500 acres, there's not that much difference between 110 feet and 400 feet. I said, okay. He said, that'll help you some, but you need those 2 lanes, don't you? I said, yeah. You have a budget for your boulevard, don't you? I said, yeah. Why don't you offer to the state? Why don't you write a check to the state for half the cost, take your budget to build your boulevard, and get the state to match you? Mm. So from the day that we were in there and presented it, and then I presented it to Henry, and 110 days later, we drove to Austin and had that deal approved on the spot. A year and a half later, we started construction, and then we had the ribbon cutting for the access roads.
Wow.
Then how do you get the main lanes? Well, it's the traffic count. And when the traffic count goes up to a point, then here comes SeaWorld. Automatic big impact.
Yes.
And people said, Marty, you're losing your mind. Why are you out there in the first place? Then you come up with the idea to get land for a freeway. And as Red McCombs laughed, he said, you built a freeway from somewhere to nowhere. And so then when SeaWorld moved around, at first they picked a site on the east side, and then they picked on the side of the west side. And then they were in trouble. So it's a long story, but I fixed it.
I want to hear it because I know that the owners were thinking of the east side. How did you convince them? Henry, from what I understand, is Henry gave you a call and said, I need your help. How did you close the deal?
Okay. The east, what I found out what was going on. The reason they couldn't go on the east side because of the expansive clay soils. You can't put those big concrete for the whales and stuff. And the expansive clay soils just rip it apart. So they were looking for another spot, and they narrowed it down to 3 spots. My spot, Rotama, and a spot where the research park was.
Oh, interesting.
Well, it's a crazy story, but all my maps, I showed the freeway, but when William Yovanovich, the chairman of the board of Whole Corporation Yovanovich that owned SeaWorld, flew in the helicopter, he didn't see the freeway because it wasn't there. And so he flew over it, and he picked a spot out Highway 90. Well, I knew a man that worked for the man who owned the land on Highway 90. And the guy told me that the guy that owned it makes no decisions quickly. And I was going to help him, but he said, no, why do I need you? I got SeaWorld. He asked me to help him. And then when I got SeaWorld for him, he said, I don't need you anymore. I said, okay, you don't need me. I came up with the idea of 211. So anyway, so he was driving SeaWorld crazy. And William Yovanovitch was about ready to pull out of San Antonio. We were about ready to lose. That's when Henry called me. We're going to lose SeaWorld. Now, it wasn't our fault, but we were going to lose it.
That would have been huge.
So I tried to figure, how do I get to Yovanovitch? You know, he's a book publisher. I didn't know anybody on his board, and I'm going crazy. So a Friday, all of a sudden, it dawned on me, Henry couldn't get a hold of him. Nobody said he could get a hold of him. But who could he not take a call from? The governor of Texas. Because Texas was the biggest buyer of his textbooks.
Who was this at the time?
William Yovanovitch.
Oh,
governor,
the governor. Who was the governor?
Mark White.
Okay.
Now, I'd met Mark White, but Red knew him real well. So on that Friday, I'm sitting on the floor in front of Red's door to when he came to work. And I'm trying to explain it to Red. I said, Red, I've got to talk to Mark White today. I'm scared. If the weekend goes by, we're going to lose it. I've got to talk to him today. So he calls up Mark White. Make a long story short, Mark White was in Dallas, going to fly to Houston. And Red said, Mark, you've got to meet with him today. We're going to lose SeaWorld. He said, okay, have him in Austin in 2 hours. So I run out, and Red told me to get in his airplane. He flew me to Austin. And I'm sitting there with the governor, and I'm explaining about the expensive clay soils. And the governor, you know, he didn't know me from Adam, and I could have been full of baloney. But he got Yovanovitch on the phone. And I explained to Mark White about the expensive clay soils. So when he got Yovanovitch on the phone, he said, there are two things I want to talk to you about. Number one, I think your laser disc technology is fantastic. We got schools in small cities. They don't have access to that kind of training. And I think you are that. And second of all, you putting SeaWorld in San Antonio is an endorsement of my company. He said, I want you to come to Austin and we have lunch.
It's a big deal, Governor of Texas asking.
Yeah. And so when he got Yovanovitch on the phone, Yovanovitch starts talking about the expansive clay soils because the second site had the expansive clay soils. So all of a sudden I had instant credibility with Mark White that I wasn't lying to him. And I'd been writing Yovanovitch letters, and he wouldn't answer them. And cause I said, I hope you go where you're going because tortious interference with the contract. But if something doesn't work out, I'm still available. So ironically, they had lunch together the next week, and Yovanovitch agreed to come look at my property. Well, still the main lanes weren't under construction, but I had other lanes under construction. So they flew him in the helicopter, and I had a road in front that was parallel to the 151, and I had the Zachary Company building it, and I had their maintainers go back and forth. I wanted dust flying.
Yeah.
And then I built a tower for him. And he comes in, and I knew then. So then I had to meet with the president of SeaWorld. Now, they'd worked 9 months with the other owner and went nowhere because he makes no decisions quickly. And he wasn't a developer. I mean, I would have helped him, but he said he didn't need me. So the lawyer for SeaWorld says, let's meet at the barn door. 6 o'clock, because the contract went dead at 6 o'clock with the other guy. So our dinner was at 6:30. And so the president of SeaWorld says, I have 10 things that need to be done for this to work. I said, do me a favor, give me all 10. So I wrote it down. He said, when can you get back with me? I said, I'm going to tell you the answers right now. One of them was move $10 million from Highway 90. I had to get the governor to move $10 million, which were my bridges. I had to buy 40 acres of land that weren't for sale from Ray Ellison. He didn't want to sell them. and I had 8 other things, and I had 1 day to do it.
1 day.
1 day.
These 10 items, 1 day to do it.
1 day to do it. So we met the next morning, Wednesday morning, and I had the engineers and the lawyers, and we're going back and forth, back and forth. So at 5 o'clock, the lawyer for SeaWorld said, okay, we'll break, and we'll start tomorrow morning. I said, no. We're on a roll. Marty, the 2 secretaries want to go home. I said, let me talk to the 2 secretaries. And I went out and handed each of them a $100 bill.
Oh.
And I said, he's going to pay you overtime, but I'm going to Paisano's, and I'm going to get you anything you want for dinner. Okay? And they said, agreed. So at that time, they didn't really need me, so I'm running to Paisano's. And Red's there having dinner with a man. And he's looking at me. He said, Marty, come over and meet this guy. And he looks at me and looks at the sacks and looks at me and looks at the sacks. He said, Marty, you're in the middle of a deal, aren't you? And I smiled. He said, oh, my God, you're going to get SeaWorld, aren't you? You're going to close it. And I said, just watch and see. So I take it back. So at 9 o'clock, Yovanovich calls, we were dealing with the president of SeaWorld. Yovanovich, the chairman of the board. He says, what are y'all doing? He said, we're here, here, and here with Marty. He said, you're farther with Marty in 3 days or 2 days than we were with the other guy. He said, but that's not the problem. He said, what's the problem? He's not going to let us out of this room until we finish. So he starts laughing. He said, and this is before FedEx. He said, if he has that attitude, I'm going to send my jet down. So 2 o'clock in the morning, we put the contract on the jet. He went up there and he signed it.
Nice. Wow.
That is an amazing story.
That's a great story.
And so another thing that happened to me. So the guy who came to build SeaWorld moved to San Antonio.
Oh.
And said, wait a minute, he lived in Orlando, he had lived in California, where you can play golf year round. And he realized you can play golf year round in San Antonio. He said, Marty, why don't you build a destination resort hotel? Now, this is exactly the same time that my financial partner went broke.
Oh.
Bear Savings went broke. But anyway, so I studied them. I playing golf and going to a resort is the last thing in the world I want to do. But that doesn't mean that there's not a market for it.
Sure.
So I did a lot of research and felt it would work. Everybody again told me I was crazy. Make a long story short, I got Hyatt involved, and they built the Hyatt Resort. So then in 1986, I get a phone call from Southwestern Bell.
I want to talk about that.
Okay. So they invited me to their building at the Hildebrand and Broadway, where Econo and Word just bought the building. And they had a box lunch for me. And they did a multimedia presentation, which was a slideshow. And they're talking about something, they could be talking Chinese to me. And I said, stop. I have no idea what you're talking about. What are you trying to sell me, and what is it going to cost? He said, no, Marty, we think you're onto something, and we're developing this stuff that we'll put in for free. Well, how much is lunch? Why are you buying lunch if you're going to put in for free? Well, we need these easements for the stuff called fiber optics. And I'm sitting there thinking, if they're willing to put millions of dollars of this stuff, I have no idea what they're talking about, called fiber optics, and it's Southwestern Bell. I said, I'll take it. I'll give you the easements. Now, I made that decision at lunch. I didn't wait. I didn't think it out, because I make decisions quickly. And not every decision I make. I make 10 decisions a day. 5 are going to be okay. 2 are mediocre, and 3 are I got to go fix the next day. Okay? But I decided, why nickel and dime them? It's Southwestern Bell. I didn't realize for 10 years what that meant for my development. That's why I have all these data centers.
Yeah.
That's why I have all these financial service centers. It was worth millions of dollars because that's what these companies. But they believed that they knew what I could do. So the first company I got was VLSI, semiconductor manufacturer, chip factory. Then I started getting financial services that needed fiber optics, and then the one that really needs it were the data centers.
Yeah.
That's right.
And then I realized that they also need power from two different directions, from two separate substations. Well, we're in between the transmission line that runs around the city around 410 and the one that runs around the city outside 1604, so they can bring power in from two different directions, from two different substations, because you can have no one point of failure. Now, that was luck, but I'd rather be lucky than smart.
That was amazing. I worked on the Microsoft data center out there, and you say millions, it's actually billions of dollars with a B, billions of dollars of investment and billions of dollars on the tax rolls because of this.
So I'll share with you a funny story. The Microsoft was my first big billion-dollar data center.
Yeah.
So I showed them 3 sites. They said they needed 40 acres, and I had 42 acres, and it was flat. So, hey, I got them. So I go out there. I said, tell me what the dimensions are. 500 by 1,000. Well, that's a perfect rectangle. Well, my 42 acres was not a perfect rectangle. So I went to the engineers. I said, draw a building on this 500 by 1,000. It won't fit. Well, draw it over the line, because I said, I sold the land to a guy who had bought it for an investment, and I'll buy part of it back, and I'll make him some money for the beginning. So the guy, I'm out there on the property, and the engineer for Microsoft said, is that all on the land you own? I said, yeah, but don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I can get the land. So then I'm calling the guy that bought the land next door. He wouldn't return my phone calls.
Uh-oh.
So I come home one night, and I'm just sick. And Renee said, Marty, what's wrong? He said, I just blew $1 billion data center. Well, that's because the site won't work. Well, show them another site. And I said, they don't like the other site. And beside that, the other site had this mountain in the middle of it. And they need a flat 40 acres. Marty, I've never seen you give up. Go make it work. So I go to Pave Dawson, and I said, I got 100 acres here. Now, remember, this land is worth 25 cents on the dollar versus the flat land. So I had 100 acres. So I had some room to work. So I said, I need to balance the site. I need a flat 40 acres. And they just said, Marty, the cost is prohibitive. I said, that's not my question. I want to know how much land I need to balance the site. Because you had to cut the top off and, balance the site. He said, Marty, this is crazy. I said, I want 2 answers from you. How much land do I need, and what is it going to cost? He said, this is crazy. I said, I want an answer. So he had the answer. So we went to the meeting. I said, when it comes time to ask the site work, which was $9 million, which was more than the land cost.
Yeah, wow.
Okay, $9 million of site work. When they ask you that question, say $9 million and don't smirk, don't say anything. And my rule is always tell the truth, but tell the truth in the right order. And always start with a positive. So we have the meeting, and I said, look, the other site didn't work. I'm going to make this site work. And to get you a flat 40 acres, I need 17 more acres. So instead of buying 42 acres, you're only going to pay for 40, but I'm going to give you for free 17 acres so we can balance the site. And he got fixated on me giving him 17 acres. He said, you're going to give me, yeah, to make the site work. Remember, it's worth 25 cents on the dollar. I said, you need 57 acres and balance the site. And he just got fixated on me giving him 17 acres. So when it got down the list, site work, $9 million, right past it, as if I said 25 cents.
Wow.
And what I found out, I realized that he wanted the buffer. So he thought the 17 acres was an asset. And he was tickled to death. And what is $7 million to $1 billion? I mean, $9 million to $1 billion data set. It's a rounding error. They were happy, and what I thought was a problem wound up being they thought they got to be. So the lesson I learned from that is, one, always tell the truth, but tell the truth in the right order. And number two is, don't take something that you think is a problem that your customer may not think is a problem. But tell the truth. But if I would have started the conversation to say, let me tell you what the problem is, it's going to cost $9 million to balance a site, I'd never gotten to the 17 acres.
Wow.
But by the order in which I said it, I got to the 17 acres, and then I got to the site work, and the site work was irrelevant. So in my career of doing business for almost 57 years, the thing I'm most proud of is I've never had a customer mad at me. I've never had a partner mad at me. I've always done what I said. I always and I protect everybody, and I don't abandon the customer after I make the sale. I stay with them. I always ask them what they need, and we become friends. It's I make it a personal relationship. I have a personal relationship because I help them. And every deal I make sure that they walk away happy, that they get, and the way I do it is I'll find out first what they want. And I give them what they want first. That's the first thing. And Red McCombs taught me that. He always said to me, Marty, always tell your customer what he wants to hear. Now, does that mean lie to the customer? Absolutely not. But listen, I give an example. My wife goes in to buy a car, walks in the Ford dealership, and she said, I'd like to look at that Ford Taurus over there, but let me tell you what my two issues are. I'm 5 foot tall. I can't buy a car that's aerodynamic. I can't see out of the back. I don't want a nice stereo. And the salesman goes over and opens up the hood and starts talking about the engine. Shit, my wife doesn't know what a cylinder is. She's the master cylinder, tells the other cylinders what to do. But is a motor important? Yes. Not important to my wife. Listen to your customer and give them what they want. And then Frank Bennick, who was the chairman of the board of Hertz Corporation, who was a friend of Red's and a friend of mine because of Red, wrote a book called Always Leave Something on the Table. Always leave something on the table where your customer is happy. And I won't do a deal if my customer's not happy.
That's a great business philosophy.
Well, I know we've got our rapid fire questions.
We do, but I have one more question.
yeah.
Just because
I have one question too.
Okay, great. Okay, we'll fight over who goes next. No, in 2016, Marty, you experienced a life-threatening accident. How did that change your perspective on the work that you do and just life in general?
It's a positive attitude. Now, let me tell you a story first. So when I was young, and my youngest child, I have 3 boys, was 1 year old, I realized I was bleeding internally. Okay? So they thought that I had an ulcer, and I was bleeding in my stomach. And so they did all the tests, looked inside my stomach, and they saw a nodule that was bleeding, but it wasn't an ulcer. So they did exploratory surgery. And halfway through the surgery, the surgeon, who was a friend of mine, comes out and said, Renee, I need to talk to you. Get your parents. I need to talk to you. And she said, no, just talk to me. He said, we found tumors on Marty's stomach on the outside. We've never seen them before. We're going to cut them all out. But I just want to let you know. So anyway, I wake up. I said, what was it? And they said, well, there was tumors, and we had to cut out 80% of your stomach, and took your spleen out and your appendix.
Oh.
And I look at him and I said, wait a minute. Can I live without 80% of my stomach? I knew I couldn't live without 80% of my heart. And I'm young. I didn't know what it was.
How old are you about this time?
I was in my 30s.
Oh, wow.
And young 30s. So he said, yeah, some changes in your life But let me go back about the tumors. He started talking, I said, stop. You took all the tumors out, no radiation, no chemo. Yeah. Let me go back. You're telling me, I said, let me ask you a question. I was heavy. I wasn't obese, but I was fat. And I said, how about me being fat? He said, Marty, I'll guarantee you, you'll never be fat another day in your life. Let me go back with the tumors. I said, stop. You took care of the tumors, didn't you? Yeah. Forget about the tumors. You're happy. You're telling me for the rest of my life, I'll never have to worry about my weight. I was always on a diet. I said, this was a good deal.
Right? That's
and so with the burn, again, you got to think positively. And as I went back, it's another problem that had to be solved. And so again, every time, I ran into problems, the freeway had problems, the Surf Ranch had problems, and my stomach and the burn were just problems and the reason, when I was in college, I had a semester that I had 4 really tough courses, and I needed 5 courses. So somebody told me the easy course was logic. And it's how lawyers use logic. How do you prove a point? If all A is B and all B is C, all A is C. If everybody and they draw these circles, if everybody lives in San Antonio, lives in Texas, everybody lives in Texas, lives in the United States. No ands, ifs, or buts. Everybody lives in San Antonio, lives in the United States. That's not what changed my life. When you get further down, you can prove no positive with a negative. So if you make a negative statement, you cannot prove a positive. And I'll give you a crazy example. So I come home one night. I said, Renee, what's for dinner? She said, Marty, I had a board meeting, lasted too long, and I didn't have time to cook dinner. I said, not a problem. We'll go out to eat. So I said, where do you want to go? Renee said, any place you want to. We got a Spurs game on. I said, let's go to McDonald's and get some hamburgers and come back and watch the Spurs game. I don't want hamburgers. Let's go to Taco Cabana, get some tacos, come back and watch the Spurs game. Marty, we had Mexican food last night. Let's go to Sea Island and get some fish. Marty, I don't want fish. Renee, where do you want to go? Well, any place you want to. Well, maybe the Spurs game is a problem. I said, let's go to the Bar and Door to get steak. Marty, I'm not too heavy. Let's go Paisano and get Italian food. We had Italian food last night. Renee, where do you want to go? Any place you want? I said, stop. Until you say something positive, we're going nowhere. So anybody can tell me that I'm wrong. Any of the people that I listen to can say, Marty, your idea is crazy. But they can't say I just can't do it. They got to tell me how to get it done. In other words, if they say, Marty, it's better to do it this way than that way, then I'll listen to them. But just tell me I can't do something, I don't accept that as an answer.
I love that.
The thing about your stories is they're really relationship driven. Your relationship with Henry when he was married, your relationship with Red. You served as chairman of the chamber. You talked about how you were inspired by the Fort Worth businessmen that you would see growing up. And if you could just really kind of touch on the importance of building relationships, especially for maybe some of the folks who are younger in the industry and they're up and coming, how important it is to build relationships and how do you do it?
You get out and you get to meet people. You take a leadership position. They get to see how you work, do something for them. You got to get involved. Out of sight, out of mind. And I go to as many functions as I can. People see me, and I talk to them. And I always ask people, what can I do for you? What can I do for you? And when I meet somebody, you know how I start every conversation? Tell me about you. Tell me about you. I'll never forget, the dean of the UT Business School comes to see me every year, talking about raising money. And so we had a new dean, it was a lady dean, so I took her to lunch, sat down, and I said, before we start, tell me about you. And you know what she said? Thank you for asking. And she sat and told me about her. You got to show people you care. And I do care. I do want to hear about them. Building relationships and being honest and participating and helping people and being a member of the chamber and being a member of that Wednesday morning breakfast group. And, I had one time been on the medical foundation and now I work with the Health Science Center and UTSA and I go to the meetings and I talk to people and they see you care. They asked me to be the chairman of the board of governors of the MD Anderson UT Health Mays Cancer Center. I did that for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And people saw me, Red said there are two types of people, givers and takers. If you were a giver, Red would give you anything. If you were a taker, he wouldn't give you the time of day.
Mm.
So Red, and also people ask you, how do you become a leader? Is it Marty, you're a leader. How do you become a leader? You know how you become a leader? It's not you choose to be a leader. Is you follow somebody that you want to emulate and you follow them and learn what they do and learn how they do. And when you turn around one day and people are following you, they make you a leader. You don't make yourself a leader. When you have people who want to emulate you, then you're a leader. But you can't say, I just want to be a leader. That doesn't work. It's people make you a leader. And that's very important. And the other thing too is, and kind of as a end to this, the thing I really fall in love with in this city are the people. They're friendly people. They're loving people. They embrace you. When the companies come to town, the first thing they say is when they come here, how friendly the people are. The tourists, how friendly the people are. It's not the Alamo, it's not the Riverwalk, it's not Hemisphere, it's not the Spurs, it's the people that make a difference. And if you really care for the people, the things I've done, it's like when I gave the land for the Papal Mass. They were in trouble. They couldn't find a location. And they were about ready to move it to Houston. And I get the phone call. I did a phone call. They walked into my office, Father David Garcia, Father Steuben, and Sister Charlene, and said, we're in trouble. And I got that deal done in 3 days. They've been working for months. But they knew that I was a fixer. I take a problem as a challenge. I don't let a problem, if people say, let me tell you what the problem is, I say, stop. Tell me what the facts are, and let's fix it. So my attitude is, you got to give back to the community, and you really, it's got to be in your heart that you love the people of San Antonio. And I really do.
I love that. And you see that in everything that you've done. A boy from Fort Worth, Texas comes to San Antonio, invests the time, the effort, the money, the energy. You're just very passionate, and that's very admirable.
Well, thank you.
This is the fun part, Marty. This is when we do our rapid fire questions. First thing off the top of your mind. What's more competitive, Spurs tickets or Fiesta medals?
Spurs tickets.
Okay. What's your go-to restaurant when closing a deal?
Boudreaux's.
Okay.
Those.
I think we heard a little bit of this, but which San Antonio project are you most proud of?
Probably the freeway, 151. That really changed the whole direction of growth of San Antonio. That one deal changed San Antonio more than anything else.
Yeah. What advice would you give young professionals who want to make a positive impact in San Antonio? Get
involved. I give that answer to everybody. Get involved. Get out. Let people see you. Do stuff. If you don't get out and let people see you and work with people, then you're never going to get there.
Great advice. What's your favorite place to take visitors who are new to San Antonio?
Today, the Pearl.
The Pearl. We
Good
keep
answer.
hearing the Pearl
Good
every
answer.
interview. What about San Antonio excites you the most right now?
What excites me the most, what they're doing with the Alamo.
Oh.
I think what they're doing the Alamo, people have no idea what it's going to do. It's going to change San Antonio. It's everybody wants to see the Alamo, and Dan Patrick and the state, the money they put into it, the people who have given money, it will it is a major game changer for San Antonio.
That's great.
It's amazing. So it's the Alamo and it's the new museum and all of those pieces that I don't think most people know. You're absolutely right.
Marty, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be on Breaking Ground SA.
I know it's hard to get me to talk, and
you were great. You've got such wonderful stories. I mean, it's not hard. You just got to tell the stories of the great work that you've done.
I'll tell you something. They had a thing with the chamber for people who moved to business people that moved to San Antonio, and kind of give them an overview about San Antonio. It was Ron Nuremberg, the city manager, the lady with SATX, and me. Well, I realized very quickly I was the oldest guy in the room. And so...
the wisest person in the room.
And the reason, and what I did was, they would say something, and then I explained why it happened. And I told the history, like how the medical foundation and how we got the medical school. And when I got through, the city manager looked at me and said, Marty, you told me things I did not know about San Antonio. Because you need to know the history and how things happen. What Hemisphere did for San Antonio. I mean, it changed San Antonio. What the Spurs did for San Antonio. What Toyota, I was on Team Toyota. And originally I was on Team Toyota because when I had to get the financing for the Hyatt, I had to go to Japan.
What are your thoughts on the Sports and Entertainment District downtown?
It's got to be done. Let me tell you something. Great cities invest in themselves, okay? And when you have an opportunity, look what we have in the Spurs. And the new deal is, take a look what they did in Los Angeles with the, it used to be the Staples Center. I think it's called something else now.
The SoFi?
Yeah, the old Staples Center.
Oh, they say the old Staples Center.
Yeah.
If you go there, it's a whole entertainment area.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And my son lives in Atlanta, and they moved the baseball park to an entertainment center.
Mm-hmm.
So when people go, it's things change. And if you don't try something new, and my deal is I'm not the guy with the greatest ideas, but I'm a thief. Somebody said, why don't you, it's like the resort hotel. I didn't know what one was, but I had to go find out. So I went to see where they worked. I understood what it was. But, I didn't come up with the idea of resort hotel. I was told. I didn't bring the Pope to San Antonio, but when they got in trouble, they came to me. Okay? And I do nothing alone. There's nothing I do that I don't have help. So when people say, Marty, you did this, I said, no, we did it. We did it. It's not me, it's we.
That's a great way to close it up.
That is great. So, Marty, thank you for joining us at the IBC Bank Studios. We want to thank our sponsor, Saul Schwartz.
Yeah, and I'm a friend of Saul Schwartz. I was on the board of IBC Bank. They too invest in the community.
They do,
and that's very important. They're givers, as I told you. They're givers and takers. IBC Bank and Saul Schwartz Company have been involved in this community a long time.
Yes, and they're both very valued members of the Real Estate Council. We really appreciate their support for Breaking Ground SA. Thank you so much, Marty. You're welcome back anytime you want to come and tell us more stories.
If you had asked me to play golf this afternoon, I'd have told you no. You asked me to do this, I could stay here for 3 hours.
We'd have you for 3 hours. But no, you're definitely welcome back anytime. Thank you for what you do, your contribution to San Antonio. And thank you guys for watching.
Thank you all.
Make sure to subscribe, comment,
Thank you
and
for
share.
having me.
Tell your friends.
See you next time.